I started college in Portland when I was 18, hundreds of miles from where I grew up in Idaho. I didn't know anyone in the city, which was exactly what I wanted. No familiar streets, no old classmates, no exes, just rain-slick sidewalks and the promise of a fresh start. For the first time in my life, I could be whoever I wanted. Everything felt strange and electric during those first few weeks. The leaves were already turning orange, the air had that rich scent of damp soil, and my dorm room, though tiny, felt like a fortress of self-discovery. I made a few friends quickly, mostly people from my floor or classes. We'd grab coffee between lectures, loiter in the common room watching old horror movies on someone's laptop, or make late-night food runs to the sketchy 24-hour diner on Burnside. That's how I met Dana. She was the kind of person who knew everyone's name by the second week. She was tall, always wore vintage jackets over band tees, and had a laugh that made people turn their heads. Dana was the social glue for our little group, always pulling new people in. After a few weeks, we were hanging out nearly every day. One chilly Friday afternoon, she introduced me to Quentin. We were all sitting around in the student lounge, sipping burnt coffee and talking about nothing. Dana walked in with Quentin trailing behind her, like a shadow in a thrifted hoodie. He was tall, had sharp cheekbones, and wore thick-rimmed glasses that gave him a kind of brooding, indie bookstore vibe. "Mira, this is Quentin. He's in my econ class. I think you guys have a lot in common," Dana said, then gave me a not-so-subtle wink that made me raise an eyebrow. Quentin sat down across from me, his eyes intense but polite. We talked for a bit, nothing deep. He mentioned he was studying business and liked biking around the city. I told him I was majoring in psychology and still getting used to the constant drizzle. He made a dry joke about the rain being Portland's love language. I laughed because it was awkward not to. He wasn't unpleasant. A bit intense, maybe. He asked a lot of questions, what kind of music I liked, if I was more of a night owl or a morning person, whether I lived on campus. But nothing that set off immediate alarm bells. Later that evening, Dana texted me. "So, what do you think of Quentin?" "Eyes." I replied with something vague. "He seems nice. Kind of quiet. He thinks you're cute. You should get coffee with him clapping hands just once." I hesitated. I wasn't really looking to date anyone. I was still adjusting to the new rhythm of college life. But I also didn't want to shut down an opportunity before giving it a fair shot. So I agreed. One coffee wouldn't kill me. We set a time for Sunday afternoon. I told myself it was just coffee. No pressure. Sunday rolled around colder than expected. The sky was a heavy, gray slate, and the wind coming off the Willamette carried just enough bite to make me regret not wearing gloves. I stuffed my hands into the pockets of my jacket and walked the 6 blocks off campus to the cafe Quentin had chosen. It was a small, dimly lit place called The Roost, tucked under a yoga studio and across the street from a tattoo parlor. It wasn't the kind of spot you just stumbled into. You had to know it existed. I took that as a good sign. At the very least, he had taste. Quentin was already there when I arrived, hunched over a battered paperback and a black coffee. He looked up as I approached and gave a small nod instead of a wave. No smile. "You found it," he said. His voice was low, like he didn't want anyone else to hear him. "Yeah," I said, peeling off my scarf. "Good pick. Cozy." He motioned to the chair across from him, and I sat down as he closed his book, something by Bukowski, I think. I went up to order a chai latte. When I returned, he hadn't moved. We started talking. At first, it was fine. He asked about my classes, and I told him about a psychology lecture I'd found interesting that week. Something about cognitive biases and how they affect relationships. He listened intently, nodding, but didn't really respond. Then he launched into a monologue about his own classes, professors, and his goal of owning his own consulting firm by 30. I tried to stay engaged, but he barely paused to ask me anything. It was like he was performing a speech he'd practiced in the mirror. Every now and then, his eyes would linger just a little too long. Not in a flirty way, more like he was scanning me, dissecting me. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself I was being judgmental. Maybe he was just nervous. I took a sip of my latte and smiled politely when he made a joke about grinding now so I can coast later. He asked if I had a boyfriend. I blinked. No, I said, stirring my drink. He nodded slowly, like that was the answer he wanted. Good. There was a pause. I looked toward the window, where the rain had started to fall in slow, steady sheets, misting the glass. I told myself this was just an awkward first date. Not everyone comes across perfectly right away. He started talking again, this time about his ex-girlfriend. Not in a passing anecdote sort of way. in detail. Apparently, she didn't understand his drive and couldn't handle how intense he was about his goals. I smiled stiffly and nodded, checking the time on my phone. "You're not like her," he said suddenly. I looked up. "You listen, and you don't freak out when someone's honest." I didn't know what to say to that. I gave a half laugh and said, "I try." He smiled a little, but it didn't reach his eyes. I finished my drink and told him I had some reading to do for class. He didn't protest, but he did watch me intently as I stood up. We exchanged a quick goodbye, and I walked back to campus with the feeling that I had just narrowly avoided something. I didn't know what, just a prickle at the back of my neck. Later that night, Dana called me. "So, how'd it go?" I hesitated. "It was fine. He's intense." She laughed. "He is. But that's just Quentin. He's super smart. A little serious, but he means well." I said I wasn't sure, that I didn't really feel a spark. She sounded slightly disappointed, but said she understood. "No pressure. But he did ask about you after. I think he really liked you." "Cool," I said, not sure what else to say. I didn't plan on seeing Quentin again. I figured he'd get the hint. But over the next week, I started seeing him all over campus. Once, I was coming out of the psych building and he was sitting on a bench nearby, not in a waiting for someone way, just staring at the doors. Our eyes met briefly, and he nodded. I gave a tight smile and kept walking. Another time, I was with Dana and 2 other friends at the dining hall, and when I turned around, there he was in line behind me. He didn't say anything, but he was close, too close. I told myself it was a coincidence. The campus wasn't huge. It wasn't totally weird to run into people. But it kept happening. He never approached me again directly, but I always felt like he was watching. Then one evening, Dana called again. Her voice was tense this time. "Hey, I need to talk to you about Quentin." "Okay." I told him you weren't interested. I thought it was better to be honest. But he didn't take it well. I sat down on my bed. "What do you mean?" He kind of lost it. "Said some stuff about you. Called you fake. Said you led him on." He was really upset. My stomach twisted. "He's not dangerous or anything," she added quickly. "But I think you should just stay away from him. Like, if you see him around, maybe don't be alone." "Great," I muttered, pressing my fingers to my temple. "I'm sorry," Dana said. "I shouldn't have pushed it. I really thought he was harmless." "It's not your fault," I replied. "You didn't know." But that night, I locked my door for the first time since moving in. The fall months in Portland had a way of creeping into your bones. By early November, it already felt like winter. The sun dipped below the horizon before 5, and with daylight saving time ending, the walk back to the dorms after late classes started to feel longer, darker, lonelier. That Thursday, I had an evening seminar in one of the older buildings on the far side of campus. The kind with creaky floors, yellowed walls, and radiators that hissed like they had opinions. When the class ended just after 9, most of my classmates had rides or roommates waiting. I pulled on my coat, wrapped my scarf tight, and headed out alone. Campus was nearly deserted. Just a few scattered lights along the path and the distant hum of traffic beyond the trees. My boots made soft clicks against the wet pavement as I cut through the usual shortcut behind the library. Halfway down the path, I turned a corner and froze. Quentin was standing there, under a flickering lamppost. His hoodie was up, hands jammed into his pockets. He wasn't moving, just standing, waiting. The breath caught in my throat. He saw me, of course. His eyes locked onto mine like he'd been waiting for hours. I told myself not to panic. Just keep walking. But my legs didn't listen. He stepped forward slowly. "Mira," he said, his voice sharper than I remembered. "Got a minute?" I forced a tight-lipped smile. "Hey, it's late. I've got to get back." "So that's it," he cut in. "You don't even talk to me now." I looked around. The path was empty. No one coming. No one behind me. I instinctively stepped back, just a little. "I just think it's better if we keep some space," I said, choosing my words carefully. "You led me on," he snapped. "No, I didn't," I said, heat rising in my chest. "It was one coffee. We barely know each other." He scoffed, shaking his head. "You laughed at my jokes. You smiled. You let me think." I was being polite. He took another step forward. Too close now. His breath was visible in the cold air. I could smell something on him, cigarettes, maybe, or something sharper underneath. "You think you're better than me," he said, voice low now, almost a growl. "Just another stuck-up bitch who thinks she can treat people like garbage." My stomach dropped. I took another step back, heart thudding. "Quentin, I'm leaving." I turned, but he lunged forward, not touching me, not quite, but close enough that I felt the cold rush of air as he moved. "You're not going to just walk away from this," he hissed. I didn't wait to hear more. I ran. My boots slipped slightly on the damp pavement, but I didn't stop. My breath came in short, terrified bursts as I sprinted past the library, past the dining hall, through the quad. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was chasing me. I didn't stop until I reached my dorm building. I fumbled with my key card, hands shaking so hard I dropped it once. Finally, the lock clicked open, and I shoved the door behind me, leaning on it like it might burst open any second. Inside, it was quiet, warm, safe, but I was sweating under my coat, my heart pounding a sick rhythm in my chest. I went straight to the RA's office and told them everything. They called campus security, who took a statement and said they'd keep an eye out. They didn't sound surprised. Quentin's had a few complaints, one of them said, scribbling notes. Nothing we could act on before. But this? We'll follow up. I stayed in my room the rest of the night, sitting on the floor with my back against the door just in case. The next few days were tense. I didn't see Quentin again, though friends told me they'd spotted him looking off near the commuter lot. Dana texted me, apologizing again, saying she and others had completely cut him off. She tried to downplay it like it wasn't just because of what happened with me, but I appreciated it all the same. I kept alert, changed my routine, walked with friends whenever I could. Slowly, the edge of fear dulled, but it never fully disappeared. Eventually, campus security told me Quentin had withdrawn from classes. Apparently, he left without much of a goodbye. Just vanished. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something closer to unease. Like a chapter had ended, but the story might not be over. Weeks passed. The holidays came and went. I focused on my classes, spent more time with people I trusted, and learned how to listen to my gut. I had a new rule for myself. If someone made me feel even slightly unsafe, I didn't owe them politeness. I owed myself peace. Dana and I stayed friends, though we didn't talk about Quentin much. I think she felt guilty. I didn't hold it against her. We were all still figuring things out. How to read people, how to protect ourselves, how to draw lines. That winter, I started journaling at night. Nothing fancy, just thoughts, fragments, things I didn't want to carry into the next day. One night I wrote. It wasn't my fault, but it was my lesson. I didn't regret going to college in Portland. I didn't regret trying to meet new people or opening myself up to new experiences. But I did wish I had trusted myself sooner. That little voice in the back of my mind, it was never trying to ruin anything. It was trying to protect me. I was 25 when I finally gave online dating a try. I'd just moved to Chicago after finishing my master's degree in media studies. I had a job editing podcast scripts for a small production company, a one-bedroom apartment near Logan Square, and a cat named Fig. Life was stable, even good in most ways. But there was still this nagging emptiness, quiet but persistent. I missed having someone to talk to at night. Someone who'd laugh at my dumb movie references or reach for my hand under the table. So one weekend, after my Friday night pizza and a few episodes of Something Forgettable, I downloaded OkCupid. I filled out my profile with a mix of sarcasm and sincerity, added a few pictures where I looked mildly presentable, and hit save. Then I started browsing. The first few days were a mix of one-word replies, awkward messages, and a few ghostings. I nearly gave up that Sunday night, but something made me open the app one last time. That's when I saw her, Lena. She had short, jet black hair curled at the ends, a crooked smile, and a bio that quoted both Sylvia Plath and The Simpsons. We matched within minutes. Her first message read, "You seem like someone who alphabetizes their spices." Is that true? We started talking and didn't stop. For a week, we messaged constantly about our jobs, our favorite childhood snacks, the worst movies we secretly loved. She worked as a graphic designer for a startup and lived with a roommate in an apartment in Ukrainian village. Her energy was this perfect blend of sharp wit and softness. I liked her almost immediately. By Thursday, she asked if I wanted to meet in person. I said yes. She suggested I come by her place on Saturday night. Her roommate would be out of town, so we'd have the place to ourselves. We'd order Thai, drink a little wine, maybe watch a horror movie. I liked the idea of avoiding the awkwardness of a loud bar or a crowded cafe. It felt casual, low stakes. Comfortable. I said I'd bring the wine. Saturday afternoon, I cleaned my apartment like someone was coming over, even though she wasn't. I shaved, changed my sheets, just in case, and picked out an outfit that said, "I'm not trying too hard, but I showered." I stopped by a wine shop and picked something red and vaguely French. By the time I stepped out into the biting air, I felt good. Hopeful. Maybe even a little giddy. Her building was less charming than I'd pictured. It was old and worn, the kind of place that had clearly been there since before anyone had invented insulation. The paint on the outside was peeling like sunburned skin. The front door buzzed when I pressed the intercom, and Lena's voice crackled through. "4th floor. Elevator's janky, sorry." I stepped inside. The lobby smelled like mildew and dust. The elevator was narrow, barely big enough for 2 people. It groaned as it rose, stopping at the 4th floor with a thud like it had hit something. The hallway was poorly lit. A few light bulbs flickered. The carpet was the color of old tea, and stained in places I didn't want to think about. I passed a door with no number, another with duct tape over the peephole. When Lena opened the door to apartment 4D, everything changed. Inside, it was warm and inviting. The air smelled like vanilla and something savory, maybe curry. Her apartment was a small but well-curated space. Art prints on the walls, soft lighting, a plush gray couch with mismatched pillows. She looked just like her photos but better, real. Her black hair was tied up in a loose bun, and she wore a forest green sweater that hung off one shoulder. She gave me a quick hug that felt surprisingly natural. "You found it," she said. "Was the elevator terrifying?" "Absolutely. I made peace with death halfway up." She laughed and took the wine from my hand. "Perfect. You'll do just fine." We sat on the couch, drinking and talking, legs slowly moving closer. Thai food arrived. We ate on the floor, using the coffee table as a makeshift dining setup. The wine made us both a little looser, and when the second bottle was half empty, Lena leaned in during a lull in the conversation and brushed her fingers against mine. I kissed her. It started gently, but soon our mouths were hungrier. Her hands were in my hair. Mine slid along the curve of her waist. She stood, pulling me with her into the bedroom, giggling as she pushed the door open. We fell into her sheets, half drunk and fully aware of what we were doing. It was clumsy at first, but not unpleasant. Her skin was warm and smelled faintly of lavender. She whispered something against my neck, something small and breathy, and I felt her fingers tug gently at my waistband. Then we heard it, a key in the front door. Lena froze. "What the hell?" she whispered, eyes wide. I sat up fast, heart hammering. "Your roommate?" "No," she said quickly. "No, she's in Michigan." The door creaked open. Footsteps, heavier than hers. A man's voice calling. "Lena." She shoved me off the bed. "Closet. Go. Now." I didn't ask questions. I scrambled into the closet, pulling the door almost shut behind me. It was dark and cramped. I crouched between coats and shoes, my heart beating so hard I was sure it was audible. Through the crack, I could see only slivers of the room. A man entered. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark coat and boots. His voice was already sharp. "What the fuck, Lena?" "What are you doing here, Marcus?" she said, her voice trying to stay steady. "I thought you said you'd be gone all weekend." "I changed my mind." "Bullshit." They argued. Loud, messy. Something about money. About her not answering calls. I realized, with a sick twist in my gut, that this wasn't her roommate. This was her ex. Or maybe not even ex, the way he talked, the anger in his voice. It wasn't distant. It was personal. Like he still thought he had a right to be there. I didn't move an inch. My legs started to cramp. I shifted slightly and knocked something over. A boot, maybe. Marcus didn't notice. They kept arguing. Lena's voice got firmer. She was trying to get him to leave. She said she had someone coming over soon. My heart stopped, but he didn't pick up on it. "I don't care who you're fucking," he snapped. "You think I give a shit?" It went on like that for what felt like hours. My knees were going numb. Sweat pooled along my spine despite the chill. Eventually, Marcus stormed out of the room and into the bathroom. It was now or never. I crept out of the closet, moving barefoot across the carpet like a ghost. Lena's eyes widened when she saw me, but she didn't say anything. I grabbed my shirt, shoved it over my head, and reached the front door. Then, too late, I heard him coming back. We locked eyes. He stopped dead. "Who the fuck?" I held out my hands. "I didn't know, man. I swear." She told me she lived alone. His face twisted into something primal. But he didn't lunge. He just stared, breathing hard, fists clenched. I backed toward the elevator, one shoe on, the other forgotten. He followed. Not running. Just walking fast. I hit the button. The elevator didn't come. I turned to face him, heart pounding, hands still up. "I don't want trouble," I said. "You already found it." He stepped in close. I could smell his cologne, cheap and overpowering. He pushed me back with one hand, not hard, just enough to test me. My back hit the wall. The elevator dinged. Without saying a word, I ducked around him and slipped inside. The doors closed just as he stepped forward. After a brutal breakup at 19, I swore off dating for what I thought would be a month or two. That turned into 3 years. It wasn't just the heartbreak that did me in, it was the mess afterward. We'd lived together, shared bills, met each other's families. We even had a joint Spotify account. When it imploded, it felt like dismantling a life. And even after the tears and the fights, what stuck with me most was the ache of being so known, and then so suddenly deleted. So by the time I turned 22 and finished college, dating felt like a foreign country, where I no longer spoke the language. It was my best friend Julie who finally convinced me to try again. She'd met her boyfriend on OkCupid and swore that online dating was easier than meeting people in real life. "It's like window shopping, but with dicks," she joked. I wasn't totally sold, but one glass of wine and a shared pizza later, she had my profile up and running. She picked my photos, helped write my bio, and even added a joke about my unholy obsession with salted caramel. "You'll be fine," she assured me. "Just be picky, and never meet anyone without texting me first." So I started messaging people. Most of them fizzled after a few exchanges. Some were fine but unremarkable. Then came Eli. He was a little quirky. His profile read like an indie movie script, references to obscure bands, a love of horror films, and a claim that his cat had better fashion sense than most humans. But his messages were thoughtful. We had a few things in common. We loved the same cheesy sci-fi movies, both played guitar, though I was barely passable, and we had matching opinions on pineapple pizza. Hard yes, but only with jalapenos. We chatted for about 2 weeks. He was occasionally awkward, sometimes weird, but never crude or pushy. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to come over for dinner and a movie. "I'll cook," he said. "It'll be low-key. No pressure." I hesitated. Meeting someone at their place for a first date wasn't usually smart. But Julie had done the same a few times, and everything had turned out fine. "He's not a serial killer," she said when I told her. "Probably just a nerd." Probably. So I said yes. That Friday I took a long shower, picked out a simple outfit, jeans, soft sweater, ankle boots, and took an Uber to his place. He lived in a quiet part of South Minneapolis, in a converted duplex with ivy crawling up the brick. He was waiting by the door when I arrived, holding a paper bag full of takeout. I blinked. "I thought you said you were cooking?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, about that." I burned the pasta. Twice. So I panicked and ordered Thai. I laughed awkwardly. "Okay, not a deal breaker." Inside, his apartment was weird. Not dirty exactly, but cluttered in a way that felt unsettling. There were movie posters plastered on every inch of the walls, mostly horror. A framed photo of Leatherface hung above the fireplace. The couch had a throw blanket with Freddy Krueger's face on it. "You really like horror," I said, trying to smile. "It's kind of my thing," Eli replied. "I like people who aren't afraid of the dark." I laughed, but something about the way he said it made my stomach clench. We sat down and ate from takeout containers. The food was good, but the conversation was stilted. Eli kept looking at me like he was watching a scene unfold rather than participating in it. He told me about his band, his job at a record store, his dream of opening a horror-themed coffee shop. I smiled and nodded, trying to stay engaged. After dinner, we moved to the couch. He picked a movie I'd never heard of, some obscure 80s slasher flick with a grainy title screen and synth-heavy soundtrack. I wasn't really into horror, but I didn't want to seem uptight. So I watched. For a while. Then Eli started inching closer. At first, it was subtle, his leg brushing against mine. Then his arm around my shoulder. Then his hand resting at the small of my back. I shifted slightly, hoping he'd get the hint. He didn't. "You look tense," he whispered. "Don't worry. I'm not like those guys." "What guys?" I asked, my voice tight. "You know, the ones who pretend to be nice just to get laid." I didn't respond. My throat felt dry. He stroked my hair lightly. "Yours is soft. Really soft." I forced a smile and leaned away. "I should probably get going soon. Early morning." He frowned. "Already?" "Yeah. I forgot I have a meeting." He stood up quickly, blocking the hallway that led to the door. His expression shifted, still technically pleasant, but with a thin veil of something darker underneath. "You sure you want to go? It's still early. We barely got to know each other." "I'm sure." He didn't move. I stayed calm. "Julie's waiting for me to text her. She'll worry." That seemed to land. He stepped aside slowly. I slipped on my boots in the entryway. One of them came loose, and I bent to fix it, but as I straightened up, I saw him watching me with narrowed eyes. "You don't have to pretend," he said. "If you weren't into it, you could have just said so." "I am saying so," I replied, my tone firmer now. He didn't reply. I opened the door and stepped into the crisp night air. The moment I hit the sidewalk, I texted Julie. "Home soon." He was weird. "Tell you later." As I waited for my Uber, I crossed the street and stood under a street lamp, just in case. I didn't want him watching me from the window. The ride home was quiet. I stared out the window, heart still thudding, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Nothing technically happened, not really. But it was the kind of nothing that leaves you shaken. Julie called as soon as I got back. "Tell me everything." I told her everything. There was a long pause. "You did the right thing," she said. "He sounds like a predator in training." "I feel stupid." "Don't. You trusted your gut. That's what matters." For the next 6 months, I stayed off dating apps. I focused on work, spent time with friends, and slowly rebuilt my confidence. Eventually, I eased back into dating, but with new rules. First dates were always in public. Always. And if something felt off, I left. No more overthinking, no more giving people the benefit of the doubt when they didn't deserve it. Eli messaged me once after that night. Just one line. "You didn't even give me a chance." I didn't reply, because I had given him a chance, and he showed me exactly who he was. Sometimes it's not about what happens, it's about what almost does, and learning to walk away before you're trapped in someone else's horror movie.